Okay, bingo time. Diversity book bingo here on BookTube. Big thanks to at Ellen Made Book Club who put this thing together. A lot of fun. As usual, I am late to the game, but I figured joining in June at about the 6 month mark for a year long challenge is probably a good point where folks would be taking a stock of their progress anyway. And as I'm a diversity guy, I have very much, pretty good luck on these sorts of things. So I have chosen for myself to do this as a blackout, which means get all the squares filled in and to only count a book only in one category. But if you want to play it, just getting, not just, but if you want to play getting five across or up and down or diagonal, or and of course you can use a certain book might fit many of these different categories. You can use it more than once. That is all allowed according to the rules, which are guidelines that Ellen kindly suggested for us. I do want to add before I show you the categories on the squares here that we do also need to be getting our continents in. So we need to have there's 6 lines and 5 pictures. I don't know if Europe got cut off on the end there. So you have to get your 5 or 6 continents. Europe wouldn't be a problem for me if it was added. And then we also, as well as at the same time as you're getting these 5 other diversity representations in there: Indigenous, minority, LGBTQIA plus, disability, and neurodivergence. Okay, so here you can see the rules. Get bingo, check 5, 5, 6, 6 for the categories I just showed you. And then on the board, 1 book equals 1 square if you want to challenge yourself. Double up all you want. So there, if you don't or can't, and 5 in a row or blackout. So I'm playing the blackout version, which means I have to fill all the squares. So here are the categories. Across the top, you got a new country. So somewhere that one's is challenging for me since, I have read a lot. So finding one that I hadn't read before was fun. Laughter, I've got a lot for that one. For another, reading event, got a fair amount for that. Memoir or biography, luckily I do have, though it's not my favorite category. Feminist, I was disappointed with the number of female authors I'd read so far. No, of course, doing this at the 6 month mark gives me 6 months to rectify any of these situations, right? So then we have some nonfiction. Again, I read more fiction than non. Recommended, so these are things that someone recommended to you. I, in my case, used BookTube recommendations. Secondhand books, representing an island, something that has future empowerment. I'll send you back to Ellen's explanation for what she means by that one. I know how I interpret it, which I'll tell you in a minute. Library books, books with animals, a 2025 release, a 5-star read, a prompt from someone's list, a comfort read, a book and adaptation, film or whatever, maybe song. I know Iron Maiden did some classic poems, Charge the Light Brigade and Ancient Mariner. Some mental health reads, some backlist reads, some short stories or short story collections, something to do with migration, a genre that is out of your comfort zone. That's one that I haven't gotten yet. A favorite author, a prize winner, and translated fiction. So we'll start at the top and just go through these one by one. So for a new country, I had not, to my knowledge, ever read anything before I read Taye Salih's Season of Migration to the North, which I read as part of my Reading the Globe Classics group with Roz Scallydandling and Katya over there at Turning Leaves. Forgotten their channel name, but anyway, and a bunch of other fine folk. So we read that one. That was a really good book. I can recommend it to you. It's a little challenging in terms of some femicide and stuff like that, but if you can handle big issues like that, it's a very beautiful read. Okay, laughter. I'm loaded on this one. I've got your Devil's Dictionary, Ambrose. Got Jonathan Wilde, Fielding's Jonathan Wilde. Boy, we started out with a bang in British literature with for comedy from Chaucer to Shyamala, and I don't know what happened. We got away from it. It's a shame. Candide, I think, is very funny. Girls of Slender Means is hilarious. Pickle, and a lot of my poems are funny, as well as the Pickle for the Knowing One from Gutenberg. Okay, so for my reading events that I'm doing Oblomov, I'm doing the Dreamsongs. I'm doing Arabian Nights. I am, as I mentioned before, still doing the Reading the Globe Classics. And I think I'm doing a Vonnegut one, but I'm not sure where we're at on the reading for that or what's going on with that. So quite a bit, and really enjoying all of those. It's a great way to, deepen my involvement with BookTube and get to know more people. So for memoir biography, I did just recently go to Jim Thompson's house, and he disappeared. So it's a true crime, I guess. So that mystery, some books there. Travel book, Robert Louis Stevenson's Travels with a Donkey. And Buddhist Disciples I'm going to save for later on. So let's cross them out. I think for this one, I'll probably end up using Robert Louis' Travels. There I've got spoiled for choice with Laughter and for another reading event, so I'm not too worried. And this one, that took Sudan off the board. I could have used that. I could have used Season for Migration North for a couple other categories, but I've already used it up. So here also, I think I have quite a few, so I'm not too worried about which one I might end up using. So I've got Muriel Sparks, the Girls of Slender Means, very, very funny. I've got Chima, I meant to write it out, her name. Anyway, I read Grief by her. She did the bunch of great books. She's from Nigeria. Gabriela Mistral is a Nobel winner from Chile. She's a poet. I did one of her poems, a Ariely poem, and Jacob's Room. Woof. Probably won't use that. I think I need to use that in one of the others. Jacob's Room. Oh, no, actually, I think it's one of these extra categories. These down here, you can overlap with the categories above. So you kind of have to probably, unless you read a mazillion books a year. Nonfiction. Again, I do more fiction, but I've got a few here. I did one on the generations. I can't remember the two authors there, but if you look in generations in my reviews, you'll find it. I did a history, King Monkut and the English. And then I did a really interesting review of a book by this Ariely guy whose topic, his specialty in psychology, I think is what he says he does, is on honesty, philosophy. Anyway, he was just busted for being very dishonest. And I think I found a confession in the book that I read by him. Okay, recommended. So I'm not sure which of those three I'll end up using. I've only the three to choose from. This here are things that I read because they were big on BookTube, and they were among my three least favorite reads so far. So me and BookTube are a little out of sync. No, not quite. It's because the things that folks are recommending that I love, I've either already read or don't have access to. And I wanted to stretch a little by checking out some of these. I thought the premise of Midnight Library sounded great, but it didn't deliver all that I wanted. Wheel of Time, honestly, I've only just read the opening of that, as you'll see in my video on it, where I compare its beginning with Yosa's End of the World. And then Ball Lightning, I know he's actually way more famous for, his trilogy, but Ball Lightning was the one my library had. So read those three based on recommendations by booktubers. Secondhand books, you're going to see there's a number of categories here that I'm not worried about. I'm definitely getting. So everything I read is either secondhand or library book. So there's going to be no trouble getting that one. Now for the island, I'm assuming we're excluding, England, Ireland, Great Britain, in which case I still have a Laxness. He's a Nobel Prize winner from Iceland. He wrote Independent People. But I've also got a Derek Walcott, Caribbean, he's from St. Lucia, that I can record right now if I want to. So I'm not going to have a problem getting that one. And I probably will do the Walcott one because I think I should have some Caribbean stuff in here. Because I saw the Pacific Islands are in there. Usually it's one or the other, or usually it's, you get both to choose from, but I think I'm going to have to find a Pacific Islander to read. Now, future empowerment, this, again, could be interpreted a lot of ways, but I think the thing that I read that really best fits with this is Buddha's disciples, which is why I chose not to use it for biography. So they give the biographies and teachings and thoughts of a bunch of the disciples of Buddha, and I do believe that reading those is highly empowering and with the potential to bring you a very positive future. For full exact titles and everything, I'll refer you to the show notes and my, playlists and stuff like that. So library, I said, that's not going to be a problem. Animals, there was only the one that I could think of. This was Freeing the Bears. It's by, what's his name? Owen Meany. World According to Garp, that author. Freeing the Bears was interesting because it started very picaresque with these two motorcycle guys going around getting into mischief. But then in the middle, it swiftly became a historical fiction about Austria during World War II. So I liked both parts, but I'm not sure if I like them together too much. Okay, I've got nothing for this one. Nothing. I don't have the money for new releases. I almost never buy them. Also like to let things sort out whether they're worth buying or not for a little while. So I think I'm going to interpret this one as I'm going to do one that's newly in the public domain. There's some really great, if I find them, I'll link them, some great booktuber videos on new cool stuff that has entered the public domain in 2025. So that's how I'll probably get my 2025 release category. I don't think I'm going to pony up the money to buy one unless I really need it for one of my group reads. But as you know, I do Oblomov and 1001 Nights and classics ones, I could usually get those for free. Now this one, I need your help, folks. You tell me what I should try to put in this square because I am not going to be doing, rating books on 5 or any number of stars. It's just not something that I do. So let me know what I should do for that square. If you have some good ideas, I hope you do, because I don't. Prompt from someone's list. So here, actually, I don't think I have one yet. So I think there's specific lists. I've found 3 of them so far. One is doing for June is memory. Another one is like hotels and motels reads. One is memory or time, and the other is on shame. Again, I'll have to sort those out where I found them. I hope I saved them in a folder for the show notes on those prompts that people give, like prompts for the year, like, certain month you read, Victorian literature, things like that. So I haven't really done any of those yet. So that's another new thing I can do on BookTube, and I'm excited to. I think I'll be able to find something on shame, memory, or motel. It would be cool if I found The Shame of the Memory Motel as a title. That would be a great book. I think I'll find those, something like that, in the library or my used bookstore. I went to the library yesterday to try, but, they're closed on Mondays, or I guess the day before yesterday. Okay, short story collections. I've done 2 different, one was in a cafe, sort of bar, swap book situation. The other was from the library. 2 different mystery collections. One was called Danger Zone, and the other was by Chestnut. I think I'll have to use Danger Zone because I think I need to use Chestnut for another category. Oh, no, wait, I think it's one of the bottom categories, so that's allowed. Anyway, not a lot to choose from there, but I think I would make an argument for Gimple as well. You could argue that it's a short story. I mean, it is short. Its importance is, novella-esque, but I think, Isaac Bassinger Singer, another Nobel laureate, he writes stories, a lot of stories. So Gimple is my favorite. There's a bunch of them about Gimple the Fool. That is very funny. That could go in the comedy section as well. Now, here again, I'm fine with backlisted and translated fiction. Everything I read is backlisted. The vast majority of stuff I read is translated. So that's not going to be a problem. For mental health, I'd have to look into, I don't know. I'm not a person who knows a ton about the author's mental health or, gender, sexuality, identities, and things of that nature. So I do know that both Virginia Woolf and Hemingway committed suicide. So I think it's fair to assume that they had some mental health struggles, at least at the end there. So I'm going to use one of them for that. Hopefully I don't need them for anything else. I don't think so. I think I've still got 2 to choose from there. Now, adaptations, there's probably a ton. Shantaram it turns out I started my channel just before January, just towards the end of December. So Shantaram was my first video, so it's technically not in 2025, but I know they've got a really cool, I believe it's an Amazon Prime adaptation for that. Well, I don't know if it's really cool. The book is really cool. I hope they do a good interpretation. But anyway, there's a million Criterion films, classic films, based on the classics that I've read. I wanted to go and take the time to find one of the, one that's maybe in Russian or another language of Oblomov or something like that. But I know that Pasolini, obviously that's Italian, he did Canterbury Tales, and I'm all but sure he did the 1001 Nights as well. So that would be a great classic film for you to watch. But I just picked East of Eden, which is by Elia Kazan is the director. And that's a James Dean movie, his first movie, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So East of Eden, great movie adaptation of that classic by Steinbeck. Now, comfort read, I didn't have one actually, because what I tend to read for comfort is cartoons, comics, therefore only funny comics. And I don't have any with me, and they would be hard to find here. But therefore, I really have to thank this exercise. Because of this exercise, I went online and found that all the Calvin and Hobbeses are available online for my reading now. So I've been reading them all morning, and I needed it. It's a stressful day at work. So I really appreciated that. There are other ones that I'd like. The one that surprises people sometimes is Dilbert. I do like Dilbert. So maybe I'll look for some of them online as well now. So thank you for adding that to my reading. BookTube. Migration. So at first I thought right away of Season Migration to the North, but I had to use that for the new country category. So Shantaram, as I mentioned, was just before. But, if you allow grace on that one, I'd use that for migration because I think his is more of a migration. He moved to India. He was on the lam from Australia where he was in prison, right? And escaped. And he was very much, embedded himself in Bombay by culture, lived for a while in one of the slums, and, really, by all accounts, learned the language, spent time in prison there. So that's a very embedded migratory story, I think, more than something like On the Road, which is more just sort of a travel log. I'm not too worried about that one, because even if I don't count Shantaram, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be reading more migration literature this year. This is one of the things I read a lot of. Just don't happen to have one right now, or at least off the top of my head. If I scoured the things I've read in the last 6 months, I bet I could find one. All right, a genre that's out of my comfort zone. This one I am not giving myself, because even though I read some nonfiction that was not stuff that I would normally read, like psychology. I like to read philosophy, but I remember, for example, in Korea, the only English books I could get were business books. So I was reading, that's out of my comfort zone. So it's not that I dislike nonfiction. I love history. Don't read enough biography. I don't know why I don't read more biographies. Memoirs, I do know why I don't, but I don't want to get into that right now. Anyway, all of this to say, what are some genres that are not in my comfort zone, shall we say? Horror, very much. Definitely the only one that I probably will not read a horror. Sorry. Just not going to happen. I mean, I read some ghost stories and some things that are horrible things happen. So maybe you could count those. But I never go into something saying, I want to feel horror. That is just not a feeling I ever want to feel. I've had enough in my real life. So now the heart there is not for any old book that's romance, as I think I said in the snobometer tag. It's the Mills and Boons Harlequin romance series type things, which, believe it or not, I've read a ton of when I was a lad becoming a young man in my auntie's trailer. That's what she had. So I read a bunch just because they're more formulaic. So I guess anything formulaic, you could say, not just romance. And there probably are, if I'm being totally honest, certain chick lit books, things that are, really branded as chick lit and really going for chick lit. Something very materialistic, the way I don't like rap music anymore because of the materialism, those kinds of things. So I will force myself to read something out of my comfort zone in the next 6 months, but it will probably not be a horror. Favorite author? I almost forgot Shakespeare. I've read a ton. Doestoevsky and Voltaire are big favorites. Fielding and all the early British funny literature. Gao Xingjian, among the Nobel winners, is one of my favorites. Singer, we've used him in another category for Gimple the Fool. He's a favorite of mine as well. Anyway, we got enough to choose from there. I think we'll be okay. And last but not least is prize winners. And there again, I've got it covered. I have a whole playlist on my channel for Nobel winners, Nobler in the Mind. And in fact, I think it's my biggest category, or second to classics probably. I think there's maybe 20 or so on there. So plenty to choose from there. As I said, I read tons of translated, Backlist, library, and secondhand books. So I'm doing pretty good. I've almost got this guy covered. Let's just make sure I have the bottom categories covered. We'll start with the continents. So I have read Nigerian, Sudanese, and Botswana literature from Africa. So Chimamanda, sorry for messing up her names, read her Grief. And I've read on the other edge of the happy spectrum, I read Blue Shoes and Happiness. Botswana, Precious Ramtotsi is her name, and she solves mysteries. She's the #1 ladies detective agency by McCall Smith. Anyway, so I've read a lot of Africa. Asia, also lots. Several Thai things, Chinese things, Q, Soul Mountain, etc., etc. South America, I've got a bunch there as well. Got Chile, got Colombia, in Evil Hour by Garcia Marquez. Gabriela Mistral, I believe that was a poem I did of hers. North America is just the three, Canada, U.S., and Mexico. So I would like to exclude the U.S., but I've read tons of Mexican literature, but not these 6 months. And I don't know if anybody in there was secretly Canadian, but I'm going to try to read a Canadian and a Mexican in the next 6 months. And New Zealand, I'm going to read something. No, I've already got a New Zealand, I think, for Australia, Oceania, which is Carrie Hume, which I've read already, Bone People. And I think I could do a video on. But I try to challenge myself to read something else from Oceania. As you may know, that is really one of the regions where completists who try to read the whole world have a lot of trouble finding authors from some of those islands. Now we've got our diversity rep, Own Voices. So I'm guessing what's meant by indigenous people here. That was a little hard to interpret sometimes. I'm sure it's First Nations with regards to the Americas. Now, when you get into Asia, there are quote unquote minority groups in Thailand, for example. But I mean, where do you draw the line? So, as I mentioned, Precious Ramotsi, she's Motswana. Is that a majority in Botswana? Do they count as an indigenous group? Are we counting the Bengalis for India or Bangladesh, like Tagore, that I've done a couple videos on? So anyway, just to be sure, I've read a ton of First Nations stuff, Silko's Ceremony and Everything by Sherman Alexie I love, and Lucy Tapahanso, she's Danae Navo, Joy Harjo, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll read one and do a video on that. Then minorities, again, could be interpreted different ways, but for the States, Chestnut, he was an African-American writer, so I'm pretty sure that's one thing that leaps to people's minds. I also snuck Dumas in there because my video on him was very much about the African side of his heritage. LGBTQIA plus, there may be more. As I mentioned, I really don't know everybody's identities on that. I do know Wolf, or at least the internet confirms that Wolf had some possible fluidity. Obviously, Orlando is interesting in terms of that issue. And then Andre Gide, I thought so, and I checked the internet, confirmed that he did, I'm pretty sure, consider himself gay. Some people might be considered something that they didn't consider themselves. I don't think that's the representation that we're going for. Again, for disability, there may be people with various things that I don't know. I've read a ton of Borges, so I'll probably put him in here. He was blind. Mental well or illness, however you want to say, I think is meant to be subsumed these days into this neurodivergent category. So there again, as I mentioned, Woolf and Hemingway, obviously, with their struggles, at least towards the end. So there it is, folks. Diversity bingo, a lot of fun. I enjoyed it, and I will report back to you at the end of 2025 to see if I got my last few boxes. Love to know if any of you are playing. Make a video. Let us know where you're at on your 6-month check-in. And please, if anyone has an idea what I can do instead of a 5-star read, I'd like to get that box in a way that's satisfying both to BookTube, but also to myself. And I could not feel good about it if it was, giving stars to somebody. Okay, thank you so much. Talk to you again soon.